everybody, and happy International Women's Day. Great day to have this going on. Thank you to ACC TV and our sponsors, and we're going to dive right in with questions for Nicole, since I know you as well as I are excited to hear from her. So let's start at the beginning of your amazing story. Can you describe growing up in your family? When did you realize you were trans?
Yeah, so, oh, there it goes. I first realized that I was not comfortable in my skin really from as soon as I could tell. I mean, having an identical twin brother, I was able to kind of compare myself and compare what I was feeling to what he was feeling. And, you know, so at the same time that Jonas was feeling comfortable and confident in his skin, I knew that I wasn't, and I knew that I did not associate myself with what, with my body. And so, you know, gender is one of the first things that you are able to feel valid in for yourself. Your identity is one of the first things that you really get to decide for yourself. And so for most people, people are from a very young age feel valid from the beginning in their identity, and they can say, yes, this is who I am. And for the most part, nobody questions that, because who is anybody to tell somebody else who they are or are not? But for myself, it was this, you know, the same way that you're able to tell what you are, you're able to tell what you're not. And I was looking in the mirror, and I was not identifying with what I was seeing. But the only difference is at the same age that everyone was, you know, affirming Jonas's identity, they were telling me that I was too young to understand the complexities of sex and gender. So there's, you know, a certain double standard that comes to trans children and knowing who you are.
Mm-hmm. And how did your family respond, and how did you cope with all the ups and downs?
So you kind of heard in that video, I used to get into arguments with my father, who's up there now, so I won't badmouth him too bad. Hi, Daddy. No, but I used to get into arguments with him, and he would come up and, you know, he'd say, oh, show me your muscles. And I could not be bothered. I was looking at my reflection in the oven mirror and like fully feeling the fantasy. And so we just go back and forth with the yes, no, yes, no. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he was raised to really be concerned with, you know, what the neighbors thought. And when your son is expressing that he is not, in fact, your son, and that he is your daughter, you know, his first thought was kind of, what will the neighbors think? And he didn't know how to cope with that. He's an ex-Republican, ex-nationally known, you know, NRA shooting sports instructor. He's an Air Force veteran. So this was kind of against everything that he had been conditioned to believe. And so I feel like I have donut on my face. They had donuts backstage for me, and I just dove in. You know, like Lady Gaga, like, I'm off that, but into donuts.
Donuts are great.
Right? And so this was against everything that he had been conditioned to believe, and so he didn't know how to respond to any of that. So he didn't. He shut down. He kind of ignored it. He poured himself into his hobbies, which left my mother pretty on her own. My mother hadn't been brought up with the same kind of concern regarding what the neighbors would think. And so her first concern was not whether or not, you know, was not with our Jonas and Nicole, you know, what are the neighbors saying about them? Their first thought was, is Jonas and Nicole, are they safe with the neighbors? And so and my father didn't do this either. Neither of them ever made me feel like I was bad or incorrect or wrong. It was more, this is something that you're going to do when nobody's around. This is not something that you're going to bring to school. This is not, when we first moved to Maine, we had a big get-to-know-you party. We invited everybody in the class, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't dress the way that I wanted to at this party. And they said, well, this just isn't, this is something we're going to keep to ourselves. But by the time I had really started school, they had been seeing what living as a boy was doing to me. At 5, 6 years old, I was severely depressed. I had anxiety and anger issues. And so we started working with the school and started trying to feel out transitioning and feeling out letting me start to wear pink and maybe grow my hair out a little bit. And so we took baby steps over the course of elementary school. And we kind of, we were bushwhacking it, and we didn't really know. None of us knew what we were doing because, back then there was no information really on transgender people, let alone transgender children. So, how could any of us have known what to do?
And then as that went on, you became a trans activist and became part of a court case that went to the Maine Supreme Court. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so over the course of this transition, we had kind of capped it off with my changing my name and using the multi-stall girls' bathroom. And that had worked fine. All of my friends were, of course, totally okay with me. These are girls that I had grown up with, and, we had done sleepovers and play dates, and, all was well. But one day, this male student in my class followed me into the girls' bathroom as a political statement on the behest of his grandfather, who was a member of this special rights Christian group back in Maine, who didn't think that my using the girls' bathroom was okay. And so at the same time, this group was threatening the school and was pretty much saying, Nicole using the girls' bathroom is somehow an infringement on my grandson's rights. I don't know. And so the school buckled, and they thought, well, if Nicole using the girls' bathroom is the issue, then if we pull her out of the bathroom, problem solved. Well, not solved. So now I'm in the staff bathroom. I am literally isolated from my classmates. And this has sent a message to the community pretty much saying, hey, here's this student who is so different from the rest of you that they cannot be allowed to exist in the same spaces as you. And so people who we had not had a problem with leading up to this sort of started taking those cues and started giving our family a hard time. And so eventually I had a bodyguard who would follow me around and make sure that I was using the right bathroom, because, sometimes I would make a break for it.
Sometimes you just got to go.
Sometimes you just got to go, right? And so I had a bodyguard making sure that, I was using the right bathroom, which is, of course, even more isolating. It's, you have a target on your back as a trans student, and then, with all of these policy changes, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So after that point, I had been in the outing club, and the school pretty much said, yeah, you can go on this overnight whitewater rafting camping trip, but you can't sleep in the same tent with the other girls. You need to be in a tent by yourself or with your parents. And we were kind of like, I have slept in the same bed as all of these girls. Like, these are all of my friends. So, we were like, okay, well, what if we had a petition or something? We got a permission slip signed by all of the parents saying, like, we know this isn't a freaking issue, but we're going to, write in paper, this isn't a freaking issue. And the school said, no, we're not going to do that. So Jonas went on the camping trip, and I went to visit a granny in Indiana. And so after that was kind of the last straw. They'd been calling ahead to field trips and stuff. We'd be going on and saying, hey, we have this student coming, don't let them use the girls' bathroom at your facility. And not everywhere has like a gender neutral bathroom. Like, I'm not going to hold it. Like, all right, well, I'm going to pee on your floor.
Again, sometimes you just gotta go.
Right? That's kind of what I feel like with all these new bathroom bills that are popping up. I'm like, all right, I won't use, the girls' bathroom, but I will pee in the street. I will like full like Maya Rudolph, like Bridesmaids, when she was like in that big wedding dress, just like, to quote Kristen Wiig, shitting in the street. I love that movie. But so yeah, that was kind of the last straw. And so after that, we left and we filed a lawsuit on the grounds of unlawful discrimination, because since 2005, which was before any of this had even started, sexual orientation, which had included gender identity at the time, was a protected class under the Maine Human Rights Act. So had the school known the law, followed the law, this would not have been an issue. They wouldn't have needed to buckle under the pressure from this other group. They could have said, no, we are doing what we're supposed to. So we left, and my father stayed behind to keep his job at the university. And for the next 6 years, we didn't live with our father. And we only saw him on weekends. And Jonas and I had to kind of be told, you can't tell people who you are. You can't, Nicole, you have to go in the closet. You can't, because we were so desperately afraid that what had happened in Orono would happen again in Portland. Because of course, every school talks a big game. They're like, oh, we have a zero tolerance policy on bullying. Like, giving a kid detention is not a zero tolerance policy. Like, I got detention. I wore a book on my head. I looked fabulous. And so we were so afraid that, and for the next 2 years, I just shut down, and I didn't have friends over. I just went to school and I came home because I didn't really know how to navigate relationships when I had to actively hide a big part of who I was. And so, yeah, we were in a lawsuit for 5 years. It went to the highest court in the state of Maine, where eventually they did rule, no, this is on the books. If the school had just done what they were supposed to, what is written in the law, this would not have been an issue. Right. But it took so long. It took 5 years for people to decide, because nobody wanted to be the first to decide which side of the fence this issue was going to fall on. But I'm very happy that they made the right decision.
Yeah, that's great. And you had a book written about this, Becoming Nicole, which was written about you and your family's story. It was very well received by the critics, and some of the things they said were, 4 ordinary and imperfect human beings had to reckon with an exceptional situation, and in so doing also became, in their own modest ways, exceptional. And the book is a miracle. It's the story of a family struggling with and embracing a transgender child. But more than that, it's about accepting one another and ourselves in all our messy, contradictory glory. The Maines family is as American as they come. Can you talk a little bit about how the book came about with Amy Ellis Nutt?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't know what they're talking about imperfect, because if anyone's read that book, they know that my mother is flawless. I mean, when I first saw the book and I was like reading through it, I was kind of like, she's kind of the only one you can root for like the first half of the book. Because a lot of Jonas's stuff ended up getting cut. My dad kind of sounds like the bad guy. And me with all of my anger issues, I was full psychopath. Like, I remember there was this part in the book where they were talking about, I don't know, something I'd written in second grade about bazookas or something. And they were talking about like, I don't know, her, Nicole's tendency for violent outbursts, and I'm like, I just think bazookas are cool. I was like, I didn't know I was being problematic. I was just like, sorry. No, and so for like the first half of the book, you're kind of like, oh, these people are terrible, but I really hope Kelly's okay. Because she really, they do not deserve her.
And spoiler alert, your mom's okay.
Spoiler alert, my mom is okay. She made it through. She managed to, put up with us for long enough for the rest of us to kind of get our acts together. But yeah, so when my father wasn't living with us, he would come down, he would take the bus every weekend. And on the bus ride, he would just type up journals and memoirs, and he would just write about what he was feeling and what he was going through. And he showed it to a good friend of ours who said, this could be a book, and that's kind of what got the ball rolling. And eventually we were introduced to Amy, who's just this phenomenal, a Pulitzer Prize winning science reporter for the Washington Post. And so she beautifully took together like all of our family records, and she took the science behind being transgender and weaved it into this really great book that has something for everybody, whether you are new to the topic of trans youth or trans people, or if you are a kind of a veteran. There's something for everybody to kind of learn in there.
Segueing a little bit into education. Education is such a huge part of activism, and it's a part of the book. Equity, inclusion, not just trans issues. Mm-hmm. What did the schools that you did attend do right, and what could they have done better?
Yeah, so I went to the first Asa Adams, where I went to elementary school, because for the majority of the time I was there, it was very, very lovely, and everything was going very well because there was an open channel of communication between my family and the administration and with teachers. Like I said, none of us really knew what we were doing, but we were all, talking, working together, asking questions. And, if somebody did have a question, we kind of addressed it together, and we were like, okay, what's the best way to kind of navigate this? And so that was really, for any school, that is the most important thing you can do, because, everybody's different. And so it is important to have trans policies, but it's also important to be working with your trans students to see, what you can do best to kind of serve them, just like you would with any student, just making sure everybody is kind of safe and feeling good and happy in school, because that's, you're there to learn, you're there to socialize, you're there to, kind of be the best, learn how to be the best person you can be. And you can't do that when you have a bodyguard breathing down your neck telling you which bathroom to use, or at least it's harder. And so what they didn't do right is when they closed that channel of dialogue and when they stopped communicating with us, because we didn't stop trying to work with the school after they had put me in the staff bathroom. We were like, well, why is this? Why are we doing this? What can we do? What can we do? But they just kind of shut down on us. And the other thing that they didn't do correctly was they didn't know the law. They didn't know and they didn't have a policy in place. So schools should not be waiting, and I talked about this in my TEDx talk, schools should not be waiting for a transgender student to come out for them to start talking about gender inclusive policies. Because only a couple years ago did the Orono school system introduce a more gender inclusive policy. I was 2 years out of high school by the time they did that, and we started that conversation when I was in first grade. So that's great that they have one, didn't really help me so much. And so it's really important for schools to have these policies on the books before a student ever decides to come out, because they might have a transgender student who is just not out yet. And it's not fair to that student to have to be the ambassador, to have to be the negotiator and the diplomat and try to, educate the educators, because that's not fair to a student. And so had the school had a policy in place, had a school known the law, know what they were required by law to do, then none of that would have been an issue.
And how about schools like ACC, more secondary schools like community colleges? What can we do better?
It's the exact same thing. It doesn't matter if it's primary school, secondary school. An open channel of dialogue is always positive. It can't hurt. And then also having policies in place so when, like I said, when a trans student does decide to come out, nobody's scrambling to try to be like, well, what does this mean? What do we do? What about the bathrooms? Is everybody gonna be okay? If you guys if you have, even not, it doesn't have to be so super specific, but even if just the bones are there, then, it saves so much heartache on the trans student and their families.
Yeah. Okay, shifting more to your work as an actress, what made you decide to try acting, and how did that career come about?
So I started acting when I was in middle school, and I had always loved playing dress up as a kid. It was kind of my moment where I could dress however I wanted. So I could be Dorothy and live my Judy Garland fantasy. I could be Wendy. I could be Cinderella or Ariel. And that was when I felt the most validated, the most comfortable in my own skin. So I always loved playing dress up. And so I started doing theater in 6th grade, which is just more dress up. Because that's really what I do as an actor. I just play dress up with a better budget.
And great costumes.
And great costumes. My costume's gorgeous. It's uncomfortable as hell, but it's gorgeous. So yeah, I started acting when I was in 6th grade, and I really, really loved it. And I always loved television, and who doesn't love superheroes?
I love superheroes.
Right? And I remember my favorite superhero growing up was Storm. I mean, the hair, the costume, she kind of won the lottery with her powers too. So she kind of like, you're nodding over there like, yeah, she did. And so I loved the drama of it all. And then as I got older, I would watch, my favorite actors on panels, or I would watch behind the scenes stuff and just kind of see, how actors were different from their characters. And it was so fun watching people interact on set and watching panels and seeing how everybody, would, and you always wonder, like, do they really get along that well off set? Do they really joke around? I don't know about everybody, but for Supergirl, yes. It is so fun, and getting to be on one of those panels at Comic-Con was a complete dream come true, and everyone's so amazing. And even in the short time I've been there, I've made such good friends. And now it gives me something to do on the weekends too, because I don't know anybody in Vancouver. So now I can go over to Katie's apartment, and me, Ozzy, will watch true crime. We were just, last Saturday, we were watching the R. Kelly documentary, and thank God we had wine. We were like, ooh, yikes. We needed Oisin, kind of keep us grounded. But yeah, so I got into it just because of how fun it looked. And so now I get to do that, and I get to play dress up. I get to have a great time with great people, and I'm a very big believer in, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life, and it very feels that way for me. I just get to go play dress up, have a great time, and tell stories that matter. And I'm so in love that I get to be on Supergirl, particularly with this season, because the content is so real and so relevant to what's happening in the States right now. And you ask yourself, okay, well, what if we actually did have aliens from Krypton? We had refugees from Daxam, from Tamaran, from Naltor. What would that look like? And it would look like exactly xenophobia, racism, ignorance, that's what it would look like. And so getting to be a part of that and tell those stories has been really special. And I think it's been very cool and very different, because the big baddie this season isn't necessarily something you can fight with heat vision or your fists. It is much bigger than that. So it's been great to see. But it's also been very interesting. I'm kind of going a little off topic here.
Hey, I am into this.
But it's been very interesting to also see people's reactions to this season, because I keep seeing a lot of folks saying, oh, don't make superheroes so political. And I'm like, what superheroes have you been reading? What comics have you been picking up for the past 50 years? They've always been political. Iron Man in the Cold War, Captain America fought literal Nazis. And people are upset because for the first time, they are on the other side of it. They are on the other side of the heat vision, if you will. but it's just been a dream come true to get to kind of be a part of that and to explore that story and be able to tell stories that matter while making amazing friendships and wearing cool costumes.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of actually answered some of the questions I had written down here already.
Nailed
which
it.
is awesome.
Future vision.
Future vision, yes. She is the dreamer. She must have dreamed this interview.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear a little bit more about how the role of Nia came about. How did you audition for it? You know, you had been on Royal Pains. How did that come about?
Yeah, so Royal Pains came about just we knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody in casting who was looking for a trans actor, and they had kind of known that I wanted to break into that, and so they said, "Oh, send in an audition." I read words for a living off of a page, and I don't know how that happened. And so I just sent in an audition for that and met with producers and casting a couple times in New York, and that kind of just happened, and I did not expect it. I was like, then I was, for my senior project, my senior year of high school, I was in New York filming a TV show, and I was kind of like, this is nuts. And so then I didn't act for like 4 years after that. And I auditioned for Supergirl. I had gotten together with agents and managers since Royal Pains, who were phenomenal, and they had sent me this one, and they said, "Hey, this one's really big. Don't screw it up, because we know you like to do that." And so, I usually just film stuff on my laptop, but I shelled out some money, got like a professional videographer. Is that the word? I'm seeing nods. Smart. I know words and vocabularies. I'm not so good at shapes, though. And so I did an audition for that. I read with my best friend back home, one of my best friends back home. And we didn't really hear anything for a while. And so I was kind of like, all right, well, swing and a miss. And then I was out in Los Angeles shooting another movie, which I'll talk about a little later. And while I was out there, my agents had kind of been like, yeah, I mean, we haven't heard anything from them. I guess they went with somebody else. And I said, all right, well, that's a bummer, because I got really into Supergirl. When I auditioned, they said this character should kind of be reminiscent, same energy of season 1 Kara. And so I said, all right, well, I haven't seen the show, so I don't know what season 1 Kara is. I was like, what's that? So I watched the show, fell in love with it because I loved Arrow. Loved Arrow. But I kind of fell off watching it somewhere after season 4. I remember that scene where Oliver had proposed to Felicity, and then they were driving away, and like someone like shoots up the car, and like she got shot, and I was so devastated. I like blacked out. I was like, no. So I loved Arrow, and so I was like, okay, so I'll probably like Supergirl. Loved Supergirl. So I've seen every episode. And so sometimes people on set are like, they'll ask me I am the on-set encyclopedia. And then Jesse's the on-set encyclopedia for Legion of Superheroes, because I swear he knows everything. And so I fell in love with Supergirl, and I was so devastated when my agents had said, we don't think you got it, because I was like, oh, no, now I'm invested in the show. Now it's going to be bittersweet, because I have to know what happens. And so then I was in Los Angeles shooting a movie, and they had called us and said, hey, can she send in another self-tape? And my agents were like, no need, she is in Los Angeles, she can come into the room. And so I did. I met with Robert and Jessica, and we just really clicked. There was a really great energy in the room, and the next day they said, hey, do you want to be on Supergirl? And I had been filming that night a really late night shoot. It was a vampire movie. And so I got home at like 6 a.m. So I was asleep when my agents called me with the news. And they said, hey, you got the part on Supergirl. And I was like, cool. It took me a little while. But yeah, so, and, since then, Nia has been so amazing to play, and I've gotten to do so many cool scenes. And I mean, that speech with Makad was so fun to do. The energy in that room was, it was palpable. I mean, it was something really, it was energized in there. And then I've gotten to do some other really cool scenes. This past week, I did an amazing scene, which I won't spoil, but it's going to be amazing. And of course, David Harewood, John Johns is directing right now, and killing it. Like, if he needs to kind of direct just everything from now on. I'm like, and it's so great because you know when you've nailed a scene with David directing, because you just somewhere back at like Circus, you just hear money, and you're like, nailed it. Although now it's kind of become a thing where if I don't hear money yelled, I'm like, oh God, I screwed it up. I was like, what'd I do? I didn't hear, David didn't yell. I didn't do it right. We got to do it again. But yeah, so it's just been a complete dream come true.
I wanted to ask you about a specific episode, and that's the blood memory episode, which was just incredible. For those of you who don't watch the show, Nia goes back to her small town home and deals with her family, including how her sister responds to the news that Nia, not her sister, is the one who has gotten the dreaming powers in her generation. And I wanted to know what parallels you saw between Nia's journey and your own.
Yeah, oh my gosh. That was an amazing episode to shoot. That was so much fun. It was cold. We did all those dream scenes in a field in Canada in the rain. And so it was, and then of course I'm in that like sheer, very like, Nia's always in like just these little tiny wrap dresses. And Makad was complaining to me one day. It was when we first started shooting in the summer. He's always in 3-piece suits. And he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so hot. Like, why do I wear so many layers? And I'm like, yeah, wait till winter. We are a 10-month season. I'm sorry you have to deal with 2 months of 3-piece suits. I'm going to be wearing wrap dresses through December. So it was very cold filming that. But it was such an amazing experience. And of course, getting to work with Hannah James is so freaking incredible. It was so amazing. And so parallels, I mean, I think we've all had someone in our lives, we're trans people anyway, have had someone in our lives tell us that we are not, that you're not a real woman. You know, you can do this or that, you can change whatever you want, but you can't change biology or whatever. And that's always really, that's really hard as a trans person to hear, because like there are some things that I can't change, but you know, it's also more frustrating because you're like, this person does not know the difference between sex and gender, and I just do not have the time to explain it to them. And then, of course, you know, also on a broader sense, I think anyone with a sibling is kind of able to relate to, of course, the constant comparing of yourself to your sibling. And then also, whenever you've gotten in a fight with your sibling, you say things you don't mean. And especially, I know I do this with my brother. When we get in a fight, it's, you know, kid gloves are off. You go for what hurts. You go below the belt. And that's kind of what happened with Maeve and Nia, and you can kind of see, because Hannah's just so brilliant, you can kind of see that moment where Maeve is like, oh, what did I do? What did I say? And, you know, and then, you know, you're looking at a potentially destroyed relationship between sisters, which is, of course, at the same time in the show going through Cara and Alex. And so then, but out of that, you know, you have a really beautiful blossoming relationship between Nia and Cara. But yeah, anyone with a sibling, and because I knew doing that, I was like, I have definitely been there with Jonas when you get in a fight and you go for what hurts, and it hurts.
I mean, the hurt was so devastating, but then there was the moment where Nia's mother says, you were the daughter I was meant to have, that just is heartbreaking on an entirely different level.
Mm-hmm. As she's dying. I mean, that's just kind of like, Nia's kind of getting hit by from every angle in this episode. but yeah, that was an especially powerful scene to shoot. I mean, Kate Burton is amazing, and she's such a pro. And of course, I had a couple weeks off because I had a couple episodes I wasn't in, and so I started watching Scandal. And now every time I see Kate Burton, I'm like, "Mommy, yes!" Like, yes, Mommy. And then there was, of course, that scene where the church she was in blew up, and I was like, "Mommy, no!" But then she was okay, and I was like, "Mommy, yes." But yeah, that was an especially powerful scene to shoot. Just, it kind of brought me back to, of course, now my father is incredibly on board, and he's incredibly supportive of me, and we have a really beautiful relationship, but it kind of brings me to every time we go and speak together, and I hear his side of his transformation, and hearing him kind of, beat up on himself, but, and being so supportive now, it's just, it was a powerful scene to shoot, is all I can say.
How do you see your acting career intersecting with and/or enhancing your activism?
Yeah, well, I mean, all of my past women and gender studies professors will tell you that my favorite topic is intersectionality. And, kind of studying how all aspects of our identity intersect, and you can't really separate those from each other. My acting and my activism are intertwined, and they are intersected, and one bleeds into the other, and one lifts up the other, and with the greater platform that I had gained from activism helped me kind of springboard into acting, which then furthered that platform, which I can now use to further the activism. Hence I am here today. And so, and then on screen also, as well as off screen, I'm telling stories about trans people, and I'm looking at showing a wider variety of trans experiences, because I think for a while we were seeing trans characters who kind of served as guides or as teachers to the main cast, which was important, then. It was important to kind of showcase the trans experience and kind of introduce a wider audience to what it meant to be transgender. But now I am telling more stories about trans people whose arcs do not revolve around their transness. I mean, with Mia, her story is not about her being the first trans superhero.
I love that about her.
I love it too. She is about, I can see the future in my dreams. How am I going to deal with that? How am I going to navigate my relationship with my family? How am I going to navigate being half alien, half human in increasingly hostile environment for aliens in National City? And then also with BIT, the movie I did before I got Supergirl, it's a story about a trans girl who goes to Oregon to visit her brother, and while she's there, she is turned into a vampire by this girl she meets at a club. You gotta be careful. Sometimes you meet a girl at a club, go back to a warehouse party, make out on a roof for a little bit, and then next thing you know, you are eating people. That's just how it goes. It'd be like that sometimes. But her arc is also not about her transness. It is about, all right, how am I going to deal with my fleeting humanity now that I have to kill people to survive? How do I deal with my goodness? How do I balance that? So now my activism and acting have kind of, like I said, intertwined into telling trans stories, sharing experiences, and showing that trans people are not token characters in any friend group. We have other stuff going on outside of our transness.
Can you tell us a little bit more about BIT and when it's going to be coming out?
Absolutely. So BIT was written and directed by the legendary, well, he's a legend to me, the legendary Brad Michael Almore. He's so freaking incredible, and in making this movie, he really just wanted to make something for younger teenage girls that wasn't, princesses, and I don't know what young girls like, but something just freaking cool, something kind of a little bit dirty, a little bit nasty, but also kind of like, but also at the same time like heartwarming as someone's heart is being ripped out. It's so cool. So yeah, this girl, I play Laurel, who goes to visit her brother, played by also legendary James Paxton, who goes to visit her brother in Los Angeles, turned into a vampire, and joins this group of intersectional feminist vampires. I mean, that's kind of gold. It's like Lost Boys, but all girls, and a little bit cooler. I'm setting the bar really, really high, but I am so in love with this movie, and I had such a fun time doing it. And it explores, like I said, kind of that humanity. What do you do when you kind of lose that? What do you do when that line is blurred? And she's drawn into this group. She knows they're bad, but she's for the first time not feeling like she's an outsider. At the same time, she kind of feels like she belongs in this group almost. And so she's there, but the group is at the same time there to remind her, like, don't get it twisted. We aren't the good guys. We are not a movement. At best, we are a terrorist organization. We kill a lot of people. And so now she's kind of like, am I a bad guy? Am I kind of like the Deadpool of this story? Am I an anti? She's like, what am I? And so it's just this really, like I said, another really cool story of a trans girl whose story arc is outside of her transness. This is her wrestling with her own good and her own evil, and kind of realizing like the line's really, really blurry. And so, I'm so in love with Ben. It's so cool, and it's bloody, and I got to be covered in blood. I wasn't covered in blood a lot. I was covered in a lot of blood.
Different costume from Nia Nall.
Very different. She's very different from Nia. She's very, very different from Nia.
Great. Well, I think we're about ready to take some questions from the audience.
Hi. My name's Danielle Skidmore, and I guess I'm curious. So the Supreme Court, the Maine Supreme Court that upheld the law in support of your family, doesn't exist in Texas. We have no protection in our community for gender identity. And we've been fighting for it for a long time, but our state legislature continues to move, or at least try to move, in the wrong direction. In fact, this year we have a bill, Senate Bill 15, that would seek to invalidate our local non-discrimination ordinances. So all the benefits that we enjoy here in Austin, some in our state legislature would seek to invalidate that. So I'm wondering, how did you feel when you found out your parents were going to move to Texas?
I was like, I'll see you when you're not in Texas. No, I was very happy they were moving to Austin, because I've always heard amazing things about Austin. And, I knew that it was kind of, the blue dot in a kind of big red ocean. So I was very happy, at least, they're moving to Austin, or they're moving to Texas. All right, well, at least they're in Austin. But I was very kind of like, from Maine to Austin? I was like, you going to Texas? Really? And so my dad was always talking about how excited he was for me to come down there, and I was like, okay, sure. Yeah, it was shocking. I was kind of like, all right. But I think my dad's also really happy to be here, because he's able to kind of put more of his own personal activism back into Texas, and kind of try to get those laws changed, and try to ensure the same kinds of protections that we got in Maine down in Texas. Because as we're going to colleges and universities and high schools and community centers, we've kind of been on the coast, each side of the coast, in more liberal, more progressive areas, which is great. But the change that really needs to happen is middle America in the South, but it's hard to get there, because if you're speaking, someone has to invite you there. So now, having moved to Texas, he's excited to be able to kind of put his activism back into, his home.
Hi.
Hi.
I actually have two questions. The first one, there are a lot of RTF students here, a lot of people from the RTF department who are probably wondering if they would maybe want to go into producing, writing, directing, or even just acting. What advice would you have for any of us in that department?
I think the best advice that I can give is don't give up. Because in that industry, it's a lot of rejection, kind of like one after the other. Before I got Bit and before I got Supergirl, I'd been, doing, like 3-4 consecutive years of no's, lots of, oh, well, we don't really have any like constructive criticism for her. We don't have any reason why we don't like her. We just don't like her. And so it's very frustrating. And before Supergirl and before Bit, I was really considering like, should I be putting my energy more into something more sustainable for myself? But as I was kind of questioning that, it happened. And so it's about perseverance. It's about, you have to have a thick skin. You have to be willing to kind of trust yourself and know like, okay, this person didn't love me, but I'm going to do it. And it's just about really not giving up. You just have to keep at it. It's very exhausting, but I had a lot of really good friends helping me along the way and supporting me.
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you, I also have a lot of like trans friends and stuff like that, and I see them go through so much just garbage. I wanted to know if you had any advice for how we can like support and help create safe spaces for our trans friends.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And when I was in college, I had a really, really great group of friends who supported me through a lot also. Because college was a really hard time for me for, my own personal reasons. And it was one of the darkest times in my life. But I had this really incredible group of friends who I could, be with and who I could who would sympathize with me, sit there, listen to me, and just, kind of help me take my mind off of all of that and just being there for me. And just, we were able to have tough conversations, but we were at the same time also able to just talk about nonsense. I remember one of my favorite college memories with my group of friends, and my dad is going to go white as a sheet. One of my favorite memories with my college is for a Women in Gender Studies project. We had to talk with some of our female-bodied friends about sex positivity. And so then cut to us, we were like in my college suite, sitting around, we were drinking wine, having some wine, talking about masturbation and why it's okay, and talking about like sex positivity and everything. And it's actually like the safest I had ever felt, just being in a space with female-bodied people and being included in that conversation. It made me feel so valid in myself. And so I think the best thing that you can do for your trans friends is to not tell them that they are valid, but really show them that they are valid through your actions, including them in those kinds of conversations, and just being there, having a great time. It was the same thing with my friends when I was going through depression. Just, we were all kind of going through the same stuff. That was kind of how we ended up getting through a lot of depression stuff, was just being there and talking to each other. It was a very normal occurrence. Someone would come home from class and be like, I'm drowning myself in the tub. And we're going to be like, okay, all right, but, warm up the water because I'm going in after you. But just being able to be there with people who supported you and knew what you were going through was, like I said, really validating.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
So, just a few questions. Do you know if your character Dreamer will be appearing in the upcoming Arrow crossover, Crisis on Infinite Earths?
I have not heard anything about Crisis on Infinite Earth, but I really hope so.
Oh.
Because the crossovers always sound like a lot of fun. I didn't get to do it this year.
Do you have your favorite Arrowverse crossover?
watching them, I hadn't seen the first couple of crossovers because I didn't watch them, because having only seen Arrow and parts of Supergirl, I kind of was like, oh no, do I have to watch all of them? I was like, are they all are they like all related to what's going on in their individual shows? Like, I don't know any of that. But then they were like, no, it's kind of their own separate thing. So the only one I've seen was the most recent one.
Hi, thank you for being here. Thank you to you and your family for, writing this book and sharing this journey with all of us. I'm a mental health provider and a parent of a teen, so I see lots of teenagers also in my work and at home. And I'm wondering, you touched a little bit on the mental health aspect. What's your best advice for people getting the help they need? And, for parents, educators, and counselors to pay attention to?
Yeah, so I can only really speak to my own experience. But with me, for me, it was about finding someone that I could feel comfortable being honest with. I kind of jumped around a lot with counselors just for various reasons, and sometimes it kind of made it hard to open up, and some counselors I found a little judgmental.
Yeah, it has to be a good fit.
Yeah, right? So I think for mental health professionals and also for parents and for educators and really anybody, if somebody comes to you with something personal, you can't kind of come at them judgmental or kind of questioning of them, because that makes that person kind of regret coming out, and then they're going to kind of go back in. That happened to me a couple of times. And then also, there's nothing wrong with being medicated. Also, I've seen kind of a lot of stigma around being medicated for anxiety or depression or what have you. And, I don't know, there was this like one, I don't know, it was like a Facebook meme or something. And it was like a picture of medication and a picture of like the woods or something. It was like, this isn't an antidepressant, this is. And I was like, that's bullshit. I'm like, I could go out in the woods, I'm just gonna be depressed in the woods, right? I was like, I'm from Maine, I was already in the woods. It did not help. And so I think it's, kind of working against that stigma too and being okay with that. And, knowing what you're about. My family history has a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, lots of stuff. I should probably be more medicated than I am. No, but it's about, knowing what you're about, and as, like I said, health professionals and educators and teachers and parents coming at that at an understanding, non-judgmental way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hey. So again, like all the others, I just want to say welcome to Austin.
Thank you very much.
And a few questions like, what has been your biggest inspiration so far?
What has been my biggest inspiration so far? I think overall, my biggest inspiration has absolutely been my mother. Because, don't look at me like that, Mom. Like I had said, through the first, really through all of becoming Nicole, she was the rock that kept us together, and she really taught me what, a strong woman looks like. Someone who is willing to put in the hard work, get a little elbow grease going when it comes to making sure that you and your family are safe and, you are being treated well. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be who I am today, that's for certain, in multiple senses of the term. And I remember when I was in elementary school, she was at the school every day, working with the school, making sure that conversation was still going, making sure that channel of dialogue was open right up until it wasn't. And when it wasn't open, she let them know why that was a problem. And so she taught me how to be as outspoken as I am and to use my voice for good.
What has been your favorite part about playing Supergirl or any superhero? Or
My favorite part about playing a superhero, like I said, I was so excited to get the suit. So that was fun. But I've had a couple of moments on set where I was fully feeling the fantasy.
Okay, I just have a quick question. What advice would you give to those, because there are those who start transitioning sort of after puberty,
Yeah.
and I guess are maybe still closeted or something. So I guess what advice would you give to those who are just starting out as adults on this journey?
Yeah. It's scary. At any age, transitioning is scary because everybody feels like they are entitled to your business. There is something about being trans that makes people think that boundaries aren't a thing. I've been asked all of the weird questions. I mean, like I said, the guys on Xbox felt that they were entitled to know what was in my pants. And I was like, you guys are just the worst. Just so terrible. Everything they said was just awful. But so while everybody feels entitled to know all of your business, know that nobody is. Your transition, your business is nobody's but your own. You can choose to come out to people, you can choose not to. You don't have to share whatever you don't want to with whoever you don't want to. It's all about feeling comfortable in yourself, in your skin. Transitioning is a choice that you make to feel better about yourself. And if in doing so you don't feel good, then what's the point? You have to feel good about the choices that you've made. And so you can't let other people's perceptions of you, other people's kind of really invasive questions bring you down, because that's not what the trans experience is about. The trans experience is about you being you and loving being you. And so, yeah, you just have to kind of own yourself and own that, and you will find people who really get that and are drawn to that and appreciate that realness. And then other people don't really matter as much if they don't.
So that is a wrap. And thank you again. I know Carrie just said this, but I have to say it again. Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you to the Maines family. And thank you to ACC TV, RTF, and the LGBTQ Equity Committee.